Real estate made sense when interest rates were 18%. Real estate made sense when interest rates were 2%, when gas prices were high, when we were at war with Vietnam, Afghanistan. Historically, you are in an amazing business that benefits the consumer like none other. It's going to be difficult because volume has slowed significantly, but it's not going to be difficult because the fundamental value of real estate has changed in relation to what it can do for people. Getting someone in that first home so they can build equity and move up and later in life have that equity to sell and downsize or reverse mortgage, you create opportunities for people. And I would encourage you just to, put your head down and keep moving forward, because at some point rates are going to become attractive again, relatively speaking, and the market will start moving.
Hey, what's up, Masters? Welcome to another episode of Path to Mastery podcast. And today we are with Mr. Mortgage, Mark. Mark, you know what is really strange is I just realized I don't know how to pronounce your last name 100%.
That's funny because we always talk to each other on a first name basis in Clubhouse. It's Eitel.
Right. Eitel. That's what I thought. I just don't want to, I hate saying people's names wrong. So that's why I didn't say it. And usually I ask, but I forgot to. So it's good to have you here, man. Appreciate you popping in with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was excited when you invited me. I always enjoy your point of view. We're in the same space in real estate, although we tackle it from different sides of the fence, me being in finance. We often align with our points of view. So I always appreciate it when you've got something to share and kind of keeping everybody marching forward, because it's so easy to get distracted right now.
Yeah, amen to that. And so, yeah, again, and we met on Clubhouse, right? Like that's how I know you from listening to you, and you always share like really good information, which is why I wanted to get you on the podcast. And so today's a fun conversation. Current real estate market, opportunity or obstacle. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about Mark. Mark is a seasoned professional. You've been in the mortgage industry for a while, since what, 1999?
Yeah, I hate to admit it. 99,
yeah.
Glutton for punishment.
Well, hey, listen, I started in real estate in 2001, so not too far behind you, and it's been an awesome journey, man. And I'm looking at, you've gone through some ups and downs just like me. You're located in Florida, and I didn't realize, you were a custom home builder before you went into mortgage space.
Yeah, that was my family's company. So as a kid, I was introduced to real estate from a different perspective, building the dream house for the client, which was super cool. But I think because of that, I always saw it as a business.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That can be a very good business. A friend of mine, it's funny, he was a real estate agent, and he left real estate, left the business, and started going out and finding land. And he found a couple pieces of land, and like it changed his life. Like, yeah. not exactly, like 50 house lots and couple things like that. And like, it probably took him a couple of years to do it, but it's like game changer. And so now he turned into a developer. So, smart kid. And you also have a radio show. You have the Mr. Mortgage Show, right?
Yep.
In each episode, you decipher the industry trends with unique charisma and engaging your listeners. It's fast paced. It's fun. So, man, it's just good to have you here, my friend. It's good to meet you in person, and good to see you. I've never seen you. I just hear you all the time, right?
Yeah, I definitely have a face for radio, but I appreciate the invite. And I love that you titled today's conversation about opportunity over obstacles. And I kind of caught up on your bio before we jumped on the air today. And you're a living testimony to that. I think that philosophy of opportunity and not obstacle is way bigger than our business. And I think if we operate from that standpoint, life isn't easy, but it's simple, because we can clearly define the path that we're going in. And I always use the example of skiing, right? If you're snow skiing and you're backcountry and you're going between the trees and it's getting kind of hairy, well, if you start focusing on the trees, you're certain to hit a tree. But if you focus on the path between the trees, if you just look at the snow, that's the opportunity. And those guys find their way through it. You know, you watch some of those videos on YouTube and you're like, my God, how did they get through that? But they're seeing the opportunity. And that for me is a very easy visual reference to get my mind around, because we turn on the news and the headlines scream, you know, mortgage applications, the lowest since 1996, interest rates, the highest in 20 years. And everybody turtles in because those are the obstacles. But it doesn't change the fundamentals of real estate. And when you look at the supply and demand equation, it's stacked still to the seller's benefit. So there's a healthy demand, even at these interest rates compared to the supply. So I don't think it's as bad as, I don't think it's bad at all, actually. I think we need a bit of stagnation to get through the hangover of all of the activity that just happened. I think you have an advantage and I have an advantage of having been in the market for a long period of time. And we just saw 5 to 7 years of activity compressed into an 18-month period. A lot of people who were going to move in 3 to 4 years, 5 years, decided to do it now because of interest rates and COVID and relocation and work from home. So all we did was take all of that future opportunity and stack it into one short period of time. So there's going to be a hangover effect from that. And the people who see the opportunities, like your buddy you just mentioned, who became a builder, he went out and assembled properties and created opportunity, right? He found the lots. We did a few small projects like that where, you know, we bought 15 different parcels, assembled them, and it was a 54 home project. And that's an example of finding the opportunity. So whether it's being raised in a troubled childhood and deciding at some point in your life you're going to pivot and live a different life and not use that as an excuse, because it's easy to do that. It's easy for all of us to be victims of our environment, or to kind of shift gears and say, okay, I'm going to find a different path for myself. I'm going to focus on the snow and not the trees. And I hope that's not too airy-fairy, but I just think that's where we all need to be operating from today, because, you know, social media and the news, there's so much negative perception, because I don't even think it's a reality. It's a negative perception of what's happening. And the headline's job is to grab the next 15 or 20 seconds of our attention. And they do that by scaring the hell out of us, not by giving us the data.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said a lot, and I think ultimately, you know, depending on what side you're on, I mean, it definitely could be an opportunity, or it could be an obstacle, right? So, because it really depends on what side of the table you're on, why you're doing what you're doing, what your situation is. So I know, you know, me, you, a lot of people, I think we focus on the opportunity side, right?
Yep.
And that's the bottom line. And you said at the beginning, philosophy, you know, is bigger. So when you talk about, like, how does, I'm trying to think of a good question to ask here with regards to that.
Well, I'll share one I get almost every day. You know, I don't want to move because I've got a 4% interest rate or 3% interest rate, and I don't want to trade it in for a 7% interest rate. But you've never had this much equity. So the opportunities in the equity, nobody forecasted that home prices are going to be where they are. So you can take $10,000 or $15,000 of that newfound wealth, if you will, right? That equity, and buy your rate down or prepay some principal and create a strategy where making the move still makes sense instead of just looking at the obstacle. I had a client, a dear woman. She's an older woman that started as a consultation for a reverse mortgage. And it didn't make sense because she wanted to move within 3 years to be closer to her family. And she would have never absorbed the fees. And we looked at everything and it made sense for her just to stick it out. And I've shared this story before. The neighborhood she wanted to move in was priced in the 150 to $160,000 range, small villas, and her house was about 400,000 that she lived in now. And she was dragging her feet. And we talked maybe 6 months ago, and she was just horrified that she had waited too long. I'm never going to be able to make this move. Those units are now $300,000. Well, we've got, like any other lender, a desktop appraisal software where we can run a quick valuation. I ran the valuation on her property. It's 555. So she has another $150,000 of equity that she didn't even realize she had. So mathematically, the move is going to be the same for her. It's no more difficult. And that's what I mean with finding the opportunity in it, because she didn't realize that. She just saw the problem, right? Oh my God, it's 300 grand. I'm not going to be able to put as much in the bank as I wanted. And she just shut it all down right there. But there's oftentimes more to the story.
So let's talk about the new, like, but you mentioned the news, the headline news, that, you know, these, and I also feel like it's not just the news, but also a lot of real estate agents. Like, how do the real estate agents play into this as well when it comes to like educating their clients and kind of keeping their client? Because I was trained years ago that we need to be the media for our clients. Like, we should be the one that's providing info. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And how much of the opportunity versus opportunity versus obstacle actually comes from the real estate agent?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think it's all of our responsibility, and I don't have all the answers. And sometimes there are obstacles you can't overcome. I'm not, a yellow brick road guy. I do realize that sometimes there are problems that are bigger than just a cheery attitude. But I think as agents and loan officers, it's just as bad as on my side of the fence, where everybody is just thinking it's the end of the world. I think it's really our job, and we come from a collective where people want to learn, so it makes it easier to have these conversations. But I think making ourselves aware of all of the data behind the headlines and not just taking it at face value. For example, mortgage applications, the lowest they've been in 28 years. On the surface, that sounds like things are grinding to a halt, but we also have a ridiculously low inventory on the market right now. So they're balanced. Everything is slowing down, but values aren't going down.
But those are two separate sides of the equation, though, because the low inventory doesn't benefit the buyer.
No. But the headline indicates that most people are going to flash back to the housing bubble burst. And if there's no buyers, they think that the prices are going to fall. So they don't give you, the headline never gives you all of the data. And I think as professionals in the industry, we have a great opportunity. And I don't ever want to discount what someone feels, right? Because emotions are powerful things. If somebody says, oh my God, the market must be terrible, I just read this. I love that opening conversation. And I shared that this morning with people. We've never had an easier opening line in real estate and mortgage because the news is doing it for us. People want to talk about this. And it's a great opportunity to say, yeah, I read that headline too, but applications are down, but so are active listings. So we're not tipping the supply side cycle yet. There's no downward pressure on home prices yet. And I encourage everybody to get their mind around, like, median is another one that drives me nuts. I used a reference. If you've got, 2 dimes, a nickel, and 2 pennies, the median is a nickel. Well, if one more penny sells, now the median is a penny because it's the one in the middle. I mean, if 2 more pennies sell, it's not a true representation of value of of your house. If you just see median prices fall, because if the higher end homes aren't selling as quickly and the lower end homes are, that's going to skew median, even if every category is appreciating. So understanding what all this means, because the consumer doesn't. They see median home prices fall, mortgage interest rates are now at a place where applications are at a 28 year low. All of that, brain salad comes spitting out as bad news to the consumer, when I think there are many sides to the story that aren't making it all the way through. I think if anybody ever starts a sentence with "he said," "I heard," or "they say," they don't have the whole story.
Yeah. And I think you're right. As I'm listening to you, I think I know you're right. The buyers are looking at it from a perspective of, interest rates are higher now. And the reality is, I mean, the interest rates were too low. That's the issue we had, right? I've been doing this 23 years. You've been doing it longer than me. I bought my first house 6.5%. That was a good interest rate, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it was like 6.25. Like at the time, that was a great rate. Now I think people get spoiled. And so what do you say to people when they tell you, well, geez, the rates are 6%? That's outrageous. Like it's really not outrageous, is it?
Well, no, and it's all relative, right? Because we have inflation at 5% and rates at 5%, that's even. If inflation is 0.5% or 1% and interest rates are 3%, then the banks are making money. So it's interesting. We hold on to these vanity metrics that we don't understand. I shared a story on the radio. Believe it or not, it's hard to imagine this because I'm a skinny old man. But at one point in my life, I trained in the gym with a friend of mine, and we got big, and we met our goals, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great ego boost. And I was in the gym. We had just finished working out, and we were getting ready to leave, and we were shooting the breeze. And there was a guy that we had befriended who was a trainer. The three of us were talking, and this other guy walked by, and he was about my physical build. But my God, he was a bull. I couldn't believe how strong he was. And I said, man, that guy drives me crazy. I can't catch him. He's so much stronger than I am. And the trainer just started laughing, and it hurt my feelings for a minute. Like he was laughing at me for not being as strong as this other kid. And he said, Mark, being strong is only important in here, in the gym, and in prison. How you look and how you feel is what's important everywhere else. On the beach, nobody cares how much you can bench. I was holding on to the wrong metrics, and people are doing that with interest rates are too high for me to buy. Okay, what does that mean? Have you done the math? Is the monthly budget is the only number we care about. It doesn't matter what interest rates are or what the housing price is. We take a percentage of your income and qualify you for that number. And and just to use round numbers, David, if it's a $50,000 income and that equates to a $1,800 monthly mortgage payment, that never changes. If the interest rate goes down, you can borrow more money for $1,800. But if the interest rate goes up, you borrow less money. But that $1,800 never changes unless that $50,000 number changes. So when people say interest rates are too high, I'm going to wait, I don't understand what they're saying. Are you saying because interest rates are at this point, you can no longer afford the house you were once qualified for? That's a very different conversation. But interest rates
do you think people think the rates are going to go down? That I guess that would
they've been saying that for,
but how,
14 months. It's interesting. So I want to
go to the budget question for a minute though. Cause you mentioned the budget, and there was an article that came out a few days ago. It was a CNN, whole article about the $709. I'm sure you heard the news about the $709. The average American family is spending an extra $709 a month due to interest rates and due to inflation and everything else. So, that's real. And when we've been having so how does that impact? Does that impact people? And what do you say to somebody when they bring that up?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. So listen, there's no question that the first-time home buyer is suffering. There's more of a burden on the first-time home buyer than ever before in history, as a percentage of their income, as a home price, and as an interest rate cost. There's no question about that. But here's something you might find interesting. I've been dissecting this housing crisis and trying to figure out, do we really have a crisis? I went back to 1900 So I did this research for the show. It was on the air about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So the title of the episode was Housing Crisis, Fact or Fiction. And from 1900
Good
to
title.
where we are right now, 123 and a half years of data, never before in history has more than 69.8% of the population owned a home. And that was only 1 year in the middle of the housing bubble. Right now we're at 66%. And that's where we've averaged coming out of World War II, because we used to be much lower than that. So statistically, 2/3 of the population own a home. Statistically, 2/3 of the people have always owned a home. So is it a crisis, or are we just paying attention to the few people who are, and I'm not, listen, first-time buyers are a huge part of my business and I advocate for them all the time. So I'm not discounting it. But what I'm saying is, do we really have a crisis, or have prices just created a difficult barrier to entry? Because it's not the interest rates. The interest rates aren't the problem. It's where prices are in relation to the interest rates and how quickly we got here. So
well, for people listening, but if you say the interest rate is not the problem, the interest rates will determine the amount of house you can buy.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. What I mean by that is a 6.5% or 7% interest rate historically is a fair cost of money. A 6.5% or 7% interest rate on a $500,000 house that used to be $300,000 is where we had a unique thing happen in a very short period of time, where prices and rates moved in conjunction with one another. But what I mean is the interest rate in and of itself isn't going to push prices down, or they would have already done it. And that's my argument about the interest rate. So is it now our responsibility as a first-time buyer to kind of swallow our pride and say, I'm going to buy what I can afford instead of what I want? Because, and I don't know if it's generational or if I'm just turning into that old man that sounds like my dad sometimes, but I remember buying, my first house was not a nice house, and it wasn't in a great neighborhood. It was in a neighborhood I had grown up in, but we didn't grow up in a nice neighborhood. But I could afford it. You know, it was what rent would have cost me the same. My brother went and rented an apartment for the same money that I bought this first little house. And I had a 10% interest rate. I didn't know any better. 10% interest rate and a 2.8% appreciation cycle. So opposite of what everybody's used to. And it still made sense over time. So that's all I'm saying is it do we kind of pull our wants back to meet our needs a little bit, because we got ahead of ourselves a little bit in this cycle, because we had first-time buyers that were borrowing money at 3%, buying a bigger house. They made 2 moves ahead. They never dreamt they were going to be able to buy that big of a house, but it was the interest rate that allowed them to do that, and prices caught up. So maybe we swallow our prides a little bit and say, okay, I'm going to get a smaller house in a less desirable neighborhood so I can build that equity and start moving up the housing ladder, because it's that important. People need that first house, or they're never going to have the equity they need to make moves in life. Yeah,
I'm with you 100% on that. And listen, people buy and sell for personal reasons all the time. So, you know, there's always people buying and selling for personal reasons. I want to see on Facebook, on Clubhouse. We're not on Facebook today, but normally we stream on all the platforms. But on Clubhouse, we probably get about 30 or so people in there. Does anybody on Clubhouse, if you have a question, just give us a mic flash. I'm happy to open a couple questions to Mark while he's still here with us. I don't know, Shawnee or Tony or anybody else, if you want, raise your hand. Okay, Shawnee has a question for you, Mark.
Yeah, hi. It's always good to be listening and with you, David. And for Mark, yeah, you know, as far as interest rates, and I get what you're saying about your first home, that makes perfect sense, but it all depends. You know, every situation is relative. If there's a family of 6 people and they were able to afford a 4-bedroom house before, and now it's just a 2-bedroom, that won't work for them. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I guess my feeling, it's all relative. I like what you said about interest rates because, of course, if you're renting, you're paying 100% interest. So, even if the interest rate is 7%, you're saving 93%, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Shawnee, that's a great point. And I think when we talk about government intervention into solving the housing crisis, and I know I kind of dumped a lot of stuff in the opening of this conversation. That was my point in going back and seeing what the historical participation rate in this country is. Because if a third of the people historically don't own homes for whatever reason, because the data doesn't tell us that, the data just tells us that 2/3 own homes. We're seeing people getting priced out of rentals in our area. If the government's going to intervene, I don't think the first move is in the ownership space. It could be to expand rental assistance or affordable, because we need to take care of ourselves as a society, no question about it. But the idea that everybody is ready to own a home is, I think, if the data supports that, that's not the case. So we're looking at a third of the population that can't participate in homeownership, and maybe they wouldn't anyway. They didn't when rates were 3%. So my thought about it is, do we create a ladder effect where we give them a stable opportunity with rental assistance? And certainly a family of 6 needing a 4-bedroom house can't, be asked to squeeze into a 2-bedroom, although we're seeing it locally here with where prices have gotten in the rental market. I think that's the first step, and not to try to create inventory artificially. We talked about it on the air last week. The last time in our history where we saw the government purposely incentivize consumer activity was the Cash for Clunkers program. Cars, I don't know if anybody remembers that, but after the recession, nobody was spending any money. So the government created a rebate program where if you traded in your old car, you got a big generous rebate, which was used for a down payment to buy a new car. And that's exactly what happened in the housing market for different reasons. Everybody who was going to, in the next 3 to 5 years, buy a new car, they went down to the car dealership and did it now while the free money was available. But then buy here, pay here lots didn't have any inventory. Car mechanics suffered, and charity suffered because nobody was donating those older cars to the charity to be auctioned off because they had to be destroyed as part of Cash for Clunkers. So what we did was we took a window of time, which normally would have had the same amount of activity, and squeezed it into several months with that program. But I love what Shawnee said, because I do think that we need to address the cost of providing a home for our families. I just don't know that interest rates are the problem. That's where I was going with it.
Well, Shawnee, thank you for the great question. I always appreciate when you pop in, my friend. So Mark, I know we got a hard stop in less than 10 minutes. It just went by really fast. Just 35 minutes. So let me ask you this. Well, first off, I just want to let people know that if you're on Clubhouse right now, or if you're listening to this episode in September, I'm doing a 500-mile ride this month to support children's cancer. And it's, so if you're at all interested in that, if you're on Clubhouse, there's a link up at the top, or just message me, or go to my Facebook or my link, it's David Eitel, or my Instagram page, and you're welcome to donate. Anything that you want to give is cool. $20, $100, $1,000, whatever my goal is $10,000 this month, this year. Last year we raised $6,300. So I want to beat that this year. So we're going for 10K. So anything you want to do, greatly appreciate it. It's going to the kids. Not 1 cent goes to me. It's all for the kids. So just want to throw that out there. Mark, so for you, a question is like, is it an opportunity or is it an obstacle? Let's answer the question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the opportunity is in understanding the obstacle, right? Because, here's another one. I talked to a family the other day, and they've run up a lot of debt. They're part of that $1 trillion in credit card debt. And they bought cars in the middle of the pandemic. Well, they owe way more than the cars are worth, so they can't trade them or refinance them. And they're feeling the pressure like everybody else. They've got a 4.125% interest rate on their house right now. And they were denied an equity line because of the new requirements, increased credit scores, lower LTVs. And there's a different way the debt's calculated with an equity line versus a cash out refinance. So in all of that, there's an opportunity for them with all of this newfound equity, a cash out refinance at 6.5%, paying all that debt off, saves them about $700 a month. So there's an opportunity for them. Yeah, they're going to lose that all-time low interest rate, but they're going to save themselves $700 a month in expenses. And to a lot of families, that's a huge difference. So I'm not saying that every obstacle is something that we can overcome, but we can't stop at the headlines because there's always more to the conversation. You know, the rest of that conversation is, are the people going to go out and do it again and run up all that credit card debt again and eat up more of their equity? Well, hopefully they've learned their lesson to be cautious moving forward. But my point is there's an opportunity for them. You know, people have all of this equity and these super low interest rates is an opportunity keeping your house, renting it out, continue to build equity because you're never going to own a rental property in this lifetime with a 3% interest rate. It's just not going to happen. The loan programs on investment properties don't dictate those low interest rates on residential rentals. So if you don't need to pull that equity out to make the move, could you rent that out, let somebody else continue to pay down your principal, and now build equity in 2 homes? That's an opportunity that didn't exist 5 years ago. So I'm not suggesting by any means, listen, we're in for a period of time where it's going to be difficult. You know, every deal that I'm looking at now, there are challenges where, you know, 18 months ago, people were throwing bags of money around like it was, you know, the end of the world. My only suggestion is, as industry professionals, that we get a handle on all of the tools necessary to help families work through some of these situations, because people are rich with equity. And I'm not suggesting that they go out there and waste it foolishly, but those opportunities here's another one. Does it make sense to take an equity line, pull $50,000 out of your house and go buy a rental property? Now you've spent none of your savings. It's like if you had a Bank of America checking account and you took 50 out of it and you went down and put it in Wells Fargo. You've got equity now in 2 banks. So you would have equity in 2 houses. Is that an opportunity? Now you can buy a rental property with some of your equity, and assuming that it cash flows, and at these interest rates and these price points, that's where the challenge is. And that's where a good agent can make sense of a deal if it pencils. But those are the suggestions that I have to people. The senior community, selling and cashing out this big chunk of equity and using a reverse mortgage purchase strategy so they don't have a monthly mortgage payment. That's an opportunity a lot of people didn't think they were going to have. And the only reason they have it is because of the COVID appreciation cycle in real estate. So that would be my encouragement. And again, I can't stress enough, there are going to be obstacles out there that we can't overcome. You know, the 580 credit score, first-time home buyer that's, you know, making 45 grand a year, that person right now is probably priced out of most markets. But
yeah,
that's always the challenge of the entry point for the first-time buyer. And my heart goes out to that person, but I'm just saying within the rest of the market, I believe that there are opportunities for people.
I agree with you 100%, man. And I don't think the equity is going anywhere personally, because inventory is there's just no inventory around. And when you're looking at big institutions, I mean, that's another conversation, but when institutions buying single family homes, there's a message there, you know, you got to pay attention to that.
Well, I'll close with this, because I know we're running up against a hard stop, but I do want to say this, guys. The mortgages that were originated that caused the housing bubble are nothing like the mortgages today. We had 580 credit score, stated income, 100% LTV, interest only, 228 ARMs back then. People had no equity. They were barely underwritten. If you could sign your name, you could borrow money. And guys, I was in the business. It was that easy. It was ridiculous because everybody was banking on a ridiculous appreciation cycle mitigating risk. This time, people are fully underwritten. They're fixed rate mortgages for the most part. People never have had this much equity. I think I read an article this morning that there's almost $200,000 the average person has in equity. That's ridiculous compared to historical numbers. So I'm saying all that just to reinforce what you just said, David. I don't see the tipping point that causes the fire sale in real estate, because if people don't want to sell their homes now at these all-time high prices, unless they lose their job and Armageddon is what we're all dealing with, why would they want to sell then? You know, if they're holding on to their homes because they see value in it, that's what didn't happen last time. And one person owned many properties, 6, 8, 10 properties. So when things got ugly, they lost 6, 8, 10 properties. Now the average person owns one property. So there's so many factors that are different, that are not setting up this crazy crash cycle that a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. It's definitely not, I don't think it's coming. But I dropped my link, by the way, on Clubhouse. If you guys want to watch this, it's on my YouTube channel, because normally we stream it. We had some tech issues today, but it'll be on our YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel is David I. Hill. That's it. YouTube, just go to David I. Hill, which is all of my socials. Mark, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
MrMortgageRadio.com. Everything's there.
Radio.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And you have a podcast yourself, right? Or radio show?
Yeah, we're syndicated in 17 markets. And when the show airs on all the weekend markets, then it goes up as a podcast episode on Sundays.
I love it. And so final question for you today, man. What do you say? A lot of real estate agents listen to this. What do you want to say to those real estate agents listening right now?
Listen, real estate made sense when interest rates were 18%. Real estate made sense when interest rates were 2%, when gas prices were high, when we were at war with Vietnam, Afghanistan. Historically, you are in an amazing business that benefits the consumer like none other. It's going to be difficult because volume has slowed significantly, but it's not going to be difficult because the fundamental value of real estate has changed in relation to what it can do for people. Getting someone in that first home so they can build equity and move up, and later in life have that equity to sell and downsize or reverse mortgage. You create opportunities for people. And I would encourage you just to, put your head down and keep moving forward, because at some point rates are going to become attractive again, relatively speaking, and the market will start moving.
Outstanding, man. Well, I thought it was great, and I'll reach out to you to do it again on another topic, because this was awesome. Appreciate you.
All right, brother. Anytime. I got to have you on my show too, because there are some questions I'd like to ask you.
Love it. Love it. Let's set that up.